Hegseth's broker looked to buy defense fund before Iran attack. A company owned in part by Eric and Don Jr. has been pitching Gulf monarchies on its drone interceptors. Jared Kushner is already on the Saudi payroll to the tune of $2 billion, and he's been soliciting billions more from princes and sheikhs across the region while leading negotiations on Iran.
Criticism of U.S. President Donald Trump is intensifying at home as the war with Iran continues, with Democratic lawmakers accusing the administration and its allies of profiting from the conflict, while ordinary Americans bear the economic cost. Senator Jon Ossoff, speaking at a Democratic event in Georgia, alleged that individuals close to Trump, both within and outside the administration, have made billions by leveraging advanced knowledge of military actions and market-moving decisions tied to the war. Ossoff framed the conflict as not only a strategic and humanitarian issue, but also an economic one, arguing that the war is draining U.S. national power and wealth while driving up costs for American families. At the center of his criticism are claims of potential financial gains linked to defense spending, energy markets, and regional deals. He pointed to reports suggesting that individuals connected to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth had positioned themselves in defense-related investments ahead of the escalation. He also highlighted business activities tied to Trump's family, including efforts by companies associated with his sons to market drone interception systems to Gulf states. Ossoff further raised concerns about the role of Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, alleging that Kushner has financial ties in the region while also being involved in diplomatic outreach, a combination he suggests raises questions about conflicts of interest. Another focal point of the senator's remarks was trading activity in oil markets. Ossoff cited reports of significant movements in oil futures shortly before public statements by Trump that later influenced prices, calling for the Securities and Exchange Commission to investigate whether insider trading may have taken place.
Now let's just take a moment and try to wrap our heads around Donald Trump's war. 13 brave Americans killed and hundreds wounded. Thousands of civilians dead. Military equipment it will take years to replace. Skyrocketing inflation. Massive damage to our reputation and position in the world. But Iran's ballistic missiles and drones are not destroyed. The regime is intact, along with its ability to throttle the global energy supply, along with its stockpile of highly enriched uranium, which it only assembled after Donald Trump shredded President Obama's Iran deal. And for all this, the White House said they already need $200 billion. $200 billion after 6 weeks. That's 10 years of nationwide pre-K. That's 9 years of paid family and medical leave. And while our national power and wealth are squandered and families are made to pay more for everything, rest assured, the Mar-a-Lago mafia are finding ways to profit. Because of course they are. The Financial Times reported, quote, Pete Hegseth's broker looked to buy defense fund before Iran attack. A company owned in part by Eric and Don Jr. has been pitching Gulf monarchies on its drone interceptors. Jared Kushner is already on the Saudi payroll to the tune of $2 billion, and he's been soliciting billions more from princes and sheikhs across the region while leading negotiations on Iran. And then there was the insider trading on oil. Did you all see this? Hundreds of millions of dollars in oil futures. Just minutes before a presidential Truth Social post moved the price of oil 13%. Now, I don't know who placed those trades, but I'll tell you this. The SEC better find out. And if they won't, when you elect this new majority in Congress and you give us gavels and subpoenas, we will. We will.
The White House has not directly responded to the allegations. However, the accusations add to a growing domestic debate over the war, not just its strategic objectives, but its economic consequences and the transparency of decision making. The criticism also reflects broader political stakes. With the conflict ongoing and costs mounting, opposition figures are increasingly framing the war as benefiting a narrow circle while imposing wider burdens on the public. Ossoff suggested that congressional investigations could follow if political control shifts, signaling that the issue may remain central in domestic political discourse. Even as tensions with Iran play out abroad, scrutiny at home is intensifying, focusing on who is paying the price for the war and who may be benefiting from it. A startling warning from Iran's top leadership is now rattling global markets and sending a direct message to Washington as tensions over the Strait of Hormuz threaten to spiral once again. In a provocative move, Mohammad Baghir Ghalibaf posted a Google Maps snapshot of fuel prices near the White House, warning Americans that current prices may soon look cheap if the crisis escalates further. His message was blunt and symbolic, suggesting that any intensification of a blockade could trigger a sharp and disproportionate surge in global oil prices, hitting consumers directly at the pump. The warning comes as the United States Central Command prepares to enforce a maritime blockade targeting Iran-linked shipping, a move that has already heightened tensions following the collapse of high-stakes negotiations between Washington and Tehran. At the center of this standoff is the administration of Donald Trump, which is demanding strict commitments from Iran on its nuclear program and regional activities, conditions that Tehran continues to reject. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance has described Washington's offer as a final deal, insisting on guarantees that Iran will not pursue nuclear weapons capabilities.
The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement. And I think that's bad news for Iran, much more than it's bad news for the United States of America. So, it's having not come to an agreement, we've made very clear what our red lines are, what things we're willing to accommodate them on, and what things we're not willing to accommodate them on. And we've made that as clear as we possibly could. And they have chosen not to accept our terms. But the simple fact is that we need to see an affirmative commitment that they will not seek a nuclear weapon and they will not seek the tools that would enable them to quickly achieve a nuclear weapon. That is the core goal of the President of the United States, and that's what we've tried to achieve through these negotiations. Again, their nuclear program, such as it is, the enrichment facilities that they had before, they've been destroyed. But the simple question is, do we see a fundamental commitment of will for the Iranians not to develop a nuclear weapon, not just now, not just 2 years from now, but for the long term? We haven't seen that yet. We hope that we will. Yeah, obviously, we were talking to the president consistently. I don't know how many times we talked to him, a half dozen times, a dozen times over the past 21 hours. We obviously also talked to Admiral Cooper, to Pete, to Marco, to the entire national security team. We talked to Scott Bessent a number of times. So look, we were constantly in communication with the team because we were negotiating in good faith. And we leave here with a very simple proposal, a method of understanding that is our final and best offer. We'll see if the Iranians accept it. Thank you.
Iran, however, maintains that its nuclear program is strictly civilian and frames uranium enrichment as a sovereign right, refusing to yield under pressure. Iran's parliament speaker Mohammad Baghir Ghalibaf has declared that the Iranian nation will not bow to U.S. pressure, warning that Tehran is prepared to teach a greater lesson if confronted again.
Speaking to reporters after returning from Islamabad, where he led Iran's high-level delegation in talks with the United States, Kalibaf thanked the negotiating team and journalists, saying their coverage helped counter what he called psychological operations by the other side. Responding to recent remarks by U.S. President Donald Trump, Kalibaf said the language of threats does not work with Iran. He stressed that since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, Iran has consistently resisted military, economic, and political pressure and will continue to do so. Addressing Trump directly, he said Iran would respond in kind to both confrontation and dialogue. If you go to war, we will fight you, and if you come forward with logic, we will treat you logically. We will not bow to any threat. Test our resolve once again so that we will teach a greater lesson, he said. Kalibaf added that the United States can only move forward by rebuilding trust with Tehran, saying Washington owes a debt to the Iranian people for past actions. He also pointed to domestic backing, saying nationwide rallies in support of the Islamic Republic strengthened Iran's position during Pakistan-mediated talks in Islamabad. According to Kalibaf, the delegation returned to Tehran after 21 hours of intense negotiations with U.S. officials led by Vice President J.D. Vance. Iran agreed to participate after signals from Washington suggested acceptance of key Iranian conditions under a 10-point framework. The talks began in Islamabad on Saturday, following a Pakistan-backed proposal for a temporary ceasefire to enable diplomacy. However, they ended early Sunday without agreement, with Iranian officials accusing the U.S. side of making excessive demands. Kalibaf described the discussions as intense, serious, and challenging, saying Iran presented several initiatives as goodwill gestures. He concluded that rebuilding trust with the United States would be a long and difficult process, and Iran would continue relying on its own capabilities and national resilience.
According to Al Jazeera, citing Iranian state-linked media, at least 50 people have been detained for alleged mercenary activities. Authorities claim the suspects were collaborating with the United States and Israel, sharing sensitive locations, including infrastructure and service facilities. Officials say they seized electronics, satellite equipment, and weapons, suggesting a coordinated intelligence operation. In a separate operation, police in Tehran raided a location in the eastern part of the city. There, authorities discovered a large cache of weapons, including firearms, grenades, and military-grade ammunition. Iranian officials say the arrests highlight ongoing threats from what they describe as foreign-backed sabotage networks. However, the claims have not been independently verified, and no response has yet come from Washington or Tel Aviv.
Iran has announced a sweeping intelligence crackdown, claiming it has arrested dozens of individuals linked to what it describes as terrorist groups and foreign intelligence networks operating inside the country. The move comes amid escalating tensions with the United States and Israel, adding another layer to an already volatile regional conflict. According to Iran's intelligence ministry, 39 individuals have been detained in recent operations. Authorities allege these suspects were recruited by hostile groups and were planning activities aimed at undermining national security during what Tehran calls ongoing U.S.-Israeli aggression. The ministry says 27 of those arrested were directly connected to two separate terrorist organizations. Among them, one operative was reportedly attempting to establish a new operational cell in the southeastern province of Sistan and Baluchistan, a region that has long seen sporadic unrest. Officials claim the suspect planned to use a cache of weapons to trigger instability and disorder, but was intercepted before the plan could be carried out. Iranian authorities are presenting this as a preemptive success, an operation that may have prevented a significant internal security incident. Beyond physical weapons, Iran is also pointing to what it describes as a digital battlefield. Two of the detained individuals are accused of working on behalf of Israeli-linked networks through social media platforms, allegedly attempting to incite unrest and shape public opinion against the state. The crackdown coincides with a significant leadership shift in Iran's security establishment. Mohammad Bakr Zolkadar, a veteran figure with decades of military and intelligence experience, has been appointed as the new secretary of the Supreme National Security Council. His appointment has been publicly welcomed by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which described him as a key figure in defending the Islamic Republic across multiple chapters of its history, from the revolution itself to the Iran-Iraq War and subsequent internal security challenges.
Iran has mocked Donald Trump's 15-point proposal for a ceasefire with Iran, calling it strategic failure.
The strategic power that you were boasting about has now turned into a strategic defeat. If the self-proclaimed world superpower could escape this predicament, it would have done so by now. Do not call your defeat an agreement. The time for your empty promises is finally over. The level of your self-preoccupation has reached the stage of negotiating with yourself. We frankly and unequivocally declare that no situation will ever return to its former state until it is our explicit will to do so. This will only come into being when the very thought of taking any action against the Iranian nation is completely eradicated from your filthy minds. Our first and final word from the very first day has been, is and always will be this: no one will ever come to terms with someone like you. Not now and not at any other time.
According to an Associated Press report, Washington, D.C. has reportedly submitted the peace plan to Iran by intermediaries from Pakistan, who offered to host renewed negotiations. The proposal comes amid 1,000 troops from the U.S. military's 82nd Airborne Division being sent to the Middle East in the coming days. The Pentagon is also in the process of deploying 2 Marine units that will add about 5,000 Marines and thousands of sailors to the region, the AP report added.
We're having, by the way, a tremendous success, as you know, in Iran. We had one in Venezuela, and now we're having one in Iran. They have no Navy left. They have no Air Force left. They have no anti-aircraft equipment left, no radar left, no leaders left. The leaders are all gone. Nobody knows who to talk to. But we're actually talking to the right people, and they want to make a deal so badly. You have no idea how badly they want to make a deal. Yeah, please.
Are you going to send Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff to do direct negotiations with the Iranians?
Yeah, well, we're in negotiations, as it turned out. And now you've seen what I said yesterday was exactly correct. We're in negotiations right now. They're doing it along with Marco, JD. We have a number of people doing it. And the other side, I can tell you, they'd like to make a deal. And who wouldn't if you were there? Look, their Navy's gone. Their Air Force is gone. Their communications are gone. That's the biggest problem. It's very hard to communicate them between themselves. All of the anti-aircraft is gone. Most of their missiles are gone. We're roaming free. We can do whatever we want. And as you know, today we're going to have the privilege of shooting down a very big electric generation plant, one of the biggest in the world. And one shot to the right location ends the plant, it collapses. And we held off based on the fact that we're negotiating.
Well, on Iran, can you give us any more sense of who exactly in Iran it is, either Witkoff and Kushner and others are speaking with?
Yeah, I hate to say it, but we killed all their leadership. And then they met to choose new leaders, and we killed all of them. And now we have a new group, and we can easily do that, but let's see how they turn out. We have really regime change. You know, this is a change in the regime because the leaders are all very different than the ones that we started off with that created all those problems. So this was, I think we can say, Jason, this is regime change, right?
What makes you trust them?
I don't trust anybody. I don't trust you. I mean, that's only because I know you.
You've said that before.
But if I didn't know you, I'd probably have more trust. But why do you say, what makes you trust? Do you think I trust them? I don't trust them.
Why bother talking to them?
Because they're going to make a deal. They're going to make a deal. They did something yesterday that was amazing, actually. They gave us a present, and the present arrived today. And it was a very big present worth a tremendous amount of money. And I'm not going to tell you what that present is, but it was a very significant prize. And they gave it to us, and they said they were going to give us. So that meant one thing to me: we deal with the right people.
Related?
No, it wasn't nuclear related. It was oil and gas related. And it was a very nice thing they did. But what it showed me is that we're dealing with the right people. Because, you know, you don't know, because the leadership was killed, all gone. Khomeini, all gone. But we're dealing with a group of people that I think turn out. And the present, the gift they made to us was very significant. And they said they were going to do it, and it happened. And they're the only ones that could have done it. Jennifer?
Was it related to the Strait of Hormuz and the flow?
Yeah, it was related to the flow and to the strait, yeah. It was.
Are you negotiating on who's going to control the strait from now on?
No, we'll have control of anything we want. Look, if we can end this without more lives being down, without knocking out $10 billion electric plants that are brand new and the apple of their eye, I'd like to be able to do that, you know?
Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the IRC, has issued a chilling threat to the U.S., claiming its 82nd Airborne Division could face the same fate as the USS Gerald R. Ford and USS Abraham Lincoln.
Navy Warship 121. This is Sepang Navy Station. You must alter course and go back to the Indian Ocean immediately. If you don't obey my order, you will be targeted.
As tensions escalate between the U.S. and Iran following the collapse of high-stakes talks, Tehran is drawing a red line in the waters of the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman. A senior Iranian military spokesperson has issued a chilling message, warning that if Iran's ports are targeted, then no port in the region will remain secure. The statement from Lieutenant Colonel Ibrahim Zolfakari, spokesperson for the Khatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters, signals a potential wider regional escalation, warn observers. He stressed that maritime security cannot be selective. It must apply to everyone or to no one at all. Further warning that if the security of Iranian ports is jeopardized, no ports in the Persian Gulf or the Sea of Oman would remain safe.
If the security of the ports of the Islamic Republic of Iran in the waters of the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman is threatened, no port in the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman will remain safe.
At the center of this warning is the strategic Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most vital energy routes, partially blocked by Iran targeting oil shipments linked to the U.S., Israel, and their allies. Frustrated by Iran's continued blockade of the key strait, U.S. President Donald Trump declared that a siege of Iranian ports will begin on Monday. He reiterated the threat in a statement to the press later in the day.
As you know, at 10 o'clock tomorrow, we have a blockade going into effect. That'll be 10 o'clock tomorrow. Other nations are working so that Iran will not be able to sell oil, and that will be very effective. But what we want to do is we want to, and again, we don't need it.
The warning came a day after he called Iran's control over the waterway world extortion in his social media post, and added that any Iranian forces who fire at U.S. forces or peaceful vessels would be blown to hell. Separately, the U.S. Central Command released a statement saying that the blockade of Iran ports will, quote, not impede, unquote, ships sailing through the Strait of Hormuz to or from other countries. Meanwhile, Iran has reiterated that vessels linked to, quote, enemy forces, unquote, will not be allowed to pass, stressing that others may transit, but only under strict conditions set by its armed forces. And this may not be temporary. Zolfakari has signaled Tehran could establish a permanent mechanism to control traffic through the strait that could be in place even after the current crisis ends.
Furthermore, in view of the continuation of the enemy's threats against the Iranian nation and our country's national security, also after the end of the war, the Islamic Republic of Iran will, with firmness, implement a permanent mechanism for controlling the Strait of Hormuz.
Tehran also hit back at Washington, calling the U.S. restrictions on maritime transit illegal and comparing them to acts of piracy. Earlier, reacting to Trump's threats, the head of Iran's National Security Commission said the U.S. president is dreaming.
He is voicing his own wishes, his dreams, and demands that have never been realized, and by God's will not be realized. The statements he began making just hours after the talks, saying, I'll do this and I'll do that in the Oman Sea and the distant waters of the Indian Ocean, are part of that. It is natural for a defeated president to speak this way. If he did not use such language and rhetoric, I think the extent of the failure would become unacceptable even to the American public.
A major crack is now emerging in the United States global coalition as key allies pull back from a controversial naval blockade on Iran, raising serious questions about Washington's strategy and its international backing. In a significant development, both Australia and the United Kingdom have distanced themselves from the blockade plan announced by Donald Trump, signaling growing unease among Western allies over escalating tensions in the Strait of Hormuz. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese made it clear that Canberra has not been asked to participate in the blockade, while emphasizing the need to keep the critical maritime corridor open for global trade and energy flows.
We haven't been asked to help. What we have done is continue to provide support. I've extended the period of service of our Wedgetail aircraft in the Middle East. It's providing defensive support, particularly to the UAE and to Gulf countries that aren't participants in the war but have been victims of it as a result of Iran's unprovoked attacks. And of course, there are many Australian citizens, of course, particularly in the UAE, in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, around about 20,000. And so we have very much an interest in providing that defensive support for our friends there. And that's what we were asked to do by the UAE, and that is what we have done.
Do you think a blockade is going to achieve anything at all?
Well, I want to see the resumption of peace talks. We want to see an end to this conflict. It's having a devastating impact on the global economy, and the longer it goes, the bigger the impact will be and the longer the tail will be as well. And so we want to see an end to the conflict. We've made that very clear for some time. I do wake up in the morning and there's usually some change in the circumstances in the Middle East. And what I want to see is to wake up in the morning and see that peace has broken out on a permanent basis, that we have de-escalation, that we have an end to civilian loss of life. We had an end to loss of civilian infrastructure, and that importantly, the Strait of Hormuz is about to be opened with freedom of navigation. That's what I want to see, and that's what Australians want to see, and that's what global citizens want to see as well, because this global conflict on the other side of the world is having an impact here, and it's having an impact right around the world.
At the same time, the United Kingdom has firmly stated that it will not take part in any US-led blockade, instead reiterating its commitment to freedom of navigation and warning of the economic consequences of disrupting one of the world's most vital shipping routes. Despite the lack of Allied support, the U.S. Central Command has confirmed that the blockade will go ahead, targeting maritime traffic entering and exiting Iranian ports in what is being described as a sweeping and unprecedented move. The decision comes after the collapse of high-stakes Iran-U.S. talks, pushing Washington toward a more aggressive posture in the region, even as diplomatic options appear to be narrowing rapidly. The impact was immediate and dramatic, as shipping traffic through the Strait of Hormuz reportedly ground to a halt following the announcement, with vessels turning back amid fears of escalation and uncertainty over enforcement measures. This choke point, which carries a significant share of the world's oil and gas supplies, is now at the center of a rapidly intensifying geopolitical crisis that is already sending shockwaves through global markets. Oil prices surged sharply, with Brent crude jumping more than 7%, while the US dollar strengthened and equity markets across Asia braced for losses, reflecting investor anxiety over prolonged disruption to energy supplies. Meanwhile, President Trump has signaled no urgency to return to negotiations, stating that he is unconcerned about when Iran might come back to the table, a stance that further complicates the path to de-escalation.
Wenn Sie es leid sind, ständig die Brille zu wechseln, müssten Sie das hier probieren.
China has always adopted a cautious and responsible attitude towards the export of military items, implementing strict controls in accordance with its own export control laws and regulations and its international obligations. We oppose baseless smears or malicious association.
China has firmly rejected allegations that it is supplying or preparing to supply weapons to Iran, calling such reports baseless smears. Speaking at a routine press conference, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiakun said Beijing has always maintained a cautious and responsible attitude towards the export of military equipment. He stressed that China strictly adheres to its domestic export control laws, as well as its international obligations. The denial comes in response to recent reports citing U.S. intelligence assessments. According to a CNN report, U.S. agencies believe that China may be preparing a new shipment of military equipment to Iran. The report, based on sources familiar with the intelligence, suggests that the shipment could include advanced air defense systems, potentially delivered within the next few weeks. The developments come at a sensitive time. A fragile ceasefire is currently in place in the region, and intelligence assessments indicate that Iran could be using this window to rebuild its military strength. U.S. officials are said to be particularly concerned about efforts to replenish key weapons systems with external support. Adding to these concerns, the report also claims there are indications that Beijing may be attempting to route shipments through third countries, possibly to obscure their origin.
In a related development, China has called for unimpeded navigation through the strategically vital Strait of Hormuz. The statement comes just a day after U.S. President Donald Trump reportedly threatened to blockade the key maritime corridor.
The Strait of Hormuz is an important international trade route for goods and energy, and maintaining its security, stability, and unimpeded flow is in the common interest of the international community. The root cause of the obstruction to navigation in the strait lies in the war with Iran. The solution to this problem is an immediate ceasefire and cessation of hostilities. All parties should remain calm and exercise restraint, and China is willing to continue to play a positive and constructive role.
A high-stakes message has sailed out of China and straight into the heart of West Asia's most volatile planet.
Wat je past? Oh, dat is het. Wat je is, hè?
Never. Alles weg hier. Ik werkte ook. Nee, dan oké. Ik ga dus terug. Ik kan niet meer. Hele goedjes.
Ja, goed, je moet zo. Je moet met de vingers uit.
Hier in bed. Oh, boy.
Maar is.
Nein. Ich weitermachen nicht.
Is er wat meer lekker moment?
Hey, waarom doen we
Oh, en dan nee.
Ik ken dat.
Enggak, mana? Sintai na pinga.
Dit de man. Kom on. Daar.
Stating that Beijing will respect and honor those commitments. In the same breath, he cautioned other nations to not meddle in China's external relations, a phrase that analysts read as a pointed response to Western pressure campaigns and sanctions regimes that often complicate commerce with Tehran. The subtext was unmistakable. China views its partnership with Iran as a sovereign choice, not a bargaining chip in broader power rivalries. Dong's comments appeared to acknowledge Iran's control over the strait's coastal approaches, while reinforcing Beijing's expectation that the route remains open for Chinese transit. Observers note that this position aligns with China's wider strategy of safeguarding sea lanes from the South China Sea to the Persian Gulf, ensuring that energy flows remain insulated from political turbulence whenever possible. Strategists say the statement positions China as both stakeholder and self-stylized stabilizer, keen to avoid conflict, yet unwilling to concede ground on core economic interests. But the timing also raises the stakes. As competing powers circle the Hormuz choke point, Beijing's assertive tone may complicate delicate diplomacy, adding another heavyweight voice to an already crowded standoff over one of the planet's most vital maritime corridors.
China has emerged as a silent backer of Iran in its war against the United States and Israel. U.S. intelligence indicates that Beijing is preparing a new weapons shipment for Iran amid the fragile ceasefire, according to a CNN report citing 3 people familiar with the intelligence assessments. The report says China is expected to deliver new air defense systems to Iran within the next few weeks. U.S. intelligence also underscores that Iran may be using the ceasefire as an opportunity to replenish key weapons systems with the help of foreign partners. Two sources told CNN there are indications that Beijing is working to route the shipments through third countries to mask their true origin. So what exactly is China planning to give Iran? U.S. sources say Beijing is preparing to transfer shoulder-fired anti-air missile systems, known as MANPADS. These systems pose an asymmetric threat to low-flying U.S. military aircraft and played a significant role during the 5-week war. Tehran reportedly downed a U.S. F-15 fighter jet using this type of handheld, heat-seeking missile. Earlier, Donald Trump also indicated during a press conference on Monday that the F-15 shot down over Iran last week was hit by a handheld shoulder missile. Iran said it used a new air defense system to strike the jet, but did not provide further details. It remains unclear whether that system was Chinese-made.
A fresh twist in escalating US-Iran tensions as key Western allies break ranks with Donald Trump. The United Kingdom is now planning a so-called defensive naval mission with France after defying the US president. French President Emmanuel Macron, in a post on X, spoke of what he described as a peaceful multinational mission aimed at restoring freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. Macron announced plans to jointly organize a conference with Britain in the coming days. But there is a catch. Macron made it clear that the mission will be strictly defensive and separate from the warring parties, dealing another blow to Trump's strategy. France has called for urgent diplomacy to end the escalating conflict in the Middle East, stressing that no effort should be spared to achieve a strong and lasting peace. Macron emphasized the need for a comprehensive settlement addressing key issues, including Iran's nuclear and ballistic programs, regional instability, and the restoration of safe maritime navigation through the Strait of Hormuz. Macron also highlighted the importance of ensuring peace and sovereignty for Lebanon, underlining the need for long-term regional stability. The proposed mission will remain independent of the ongoing conflict and is intended to be deployed as soon as conditions allow, signaling a diplomatic push to stabilize one of the world's most critical trade routes amid rising global tensions. Macron's reaction came after UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said London would not be involved in enforcing the US military blockade of Iran. Speaking to BBC Radio 5 Live, the Prime Minister said he is focused on reopening the vital shipping channel of the Strait of Hormuz to reduce energy prices as quickly as possible. Starmer added that UK minesweepers and anti-drone capabilities will continue operating in the region, but British naval ships and soldiers will not be used to block Iranian ports. Trump announced the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz after talks with Iran fails to secure a lasting peace deal to end hostilities in the Middle East. Following a meeting between US and Iranian negotiators in Islamabad, Trump said the United States would begin blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. The United States Central Command also confirmed that its forces would enforce the blockade impartially on vessels entering and leaving Iranian ports, including those in the Arabian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. CENTCOM added that US forces would not impede vessels transiting to and from non-Iranian ports, and that further guidance would be issued to commercial mariners through formal notices. Around 1/5 of global oil and liquefied natural gas shipments pass through the Strait of Hormuz, with Iran effectively restricting the waterway since US-Israeli strikes began on February 28th. Global benchmark Brent crude oil surged above $100 following the blockade announcement. A major crack is now emerging in the United States global coalition as key allies pull back from a controversial naval blockade on Iran, raising serious questions about Washington's strategy and its international backing. In a significant development, both Australia and the United Kingdom have distanced themselves from the blockade plan announced by Donald Trump, signaling growing unease among Western allies over escalating tensions in the Strait of Hormuz. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese made it clear that Canberra has not been asked to participate in the blockade, while emphasizing the need to keep the critical maritime corridor open for global trade and energy flows.
We haven't been asked to help. What we have done is continue to provide support. I've extended the period of service of our Wedge-style aircraft in the Middle East. It's providing defensive support, particularly to the UAE and to Gulf countries that aren't participants in the war but have been victims of it as a result of Iran's unprovoked attacks. And of course, there are many Australian citizens, of course, particularly in the UAE, in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, around about 20,000. And so we have very much an interest in providing that defensive support for our friends there. And that's what we were asked to do by the UAE, and that is what we have done.
Do you think a blockade is going to achieve anything at all?
Well, I want to see the resumption of peace talks. We want to see an end to this conflict. It's having a devastating impact on the global economy, and the longer it goes, the bigger the impact will be and the longer the tail will be as well. And so we want to see an end to the conflict. We've made that very clear for some time. I do wake up in the morning and there's usually some change in the circumstances in the Middle East. And what I want to see is to wake up in the morning and see that peace has broken out on a permanent basis, that we have de-escalation, that we have an end to civilian loss of life, we have an end to loss of civilian infrastructure, and that, importantly, the Strait of Hormuz is about to be opened with freedom of navigation. That's what I want to see, and that's what Australians want to see, and that's what global citizens want to see as well, because this global conflict on the other side of the world is having an impact here, and it's having an impact right around the world.
At the same time, the United Kingdom has firmly stated that it will not take part in any U.S.-led blockade, instead reiterating its commitment to freedom of navigation and warning of the economic consequences of disrupting one of the world's most vital shipping routes. Despite the lack of Allied support, the U.S. Central Command has confirmed that the blockade will go ahead, targeting maritime traffic entering and exiting Iranian ports in what is being described as a sweeping and unprecedented move. The decision comes after the collapse of high-stakes Iran-U.S. talks, pushing Washington toward a more aggressive posture in the region, even as diplomatic options appear to be narrowing rapidly. The impact was immediate and dramatic, as shipping traffic through the Strait of Hormuz reportedly ground to a halt following the announcement, with vessels turning back amid fears of escalation and uncertainty over enforcement measures. This choke point, which carries a significant share of the world's oil and gas supplies, is now at the center of a rapidly intensifying geopolitical crisis that is already sending shockwaves through global markets. Oil prices surged sharply, with Brent crude jumping more than 7%, while the U.S. dollar strengthened and equity markets across Asia braced for losses, reflecting investor anxiety over prolonged disruption to energy supplies.
U.S. President Donald Trump has publicly declared his dissatisfaction with NATO and European allies amid the Iran war. Now, a NATO nation has made a major diplomatic move that may irk the U.S. president more. Spain has officially reopened its embassy in Tehran. The move comes after a temporary suspension of diplomatic activity and signals a cautious return to engagement following recent tensions. Spain's ambassador, Antonio Sanchez Benedito Gaspar, confirmed the development in a social media post announcing that embassy operations have now restarted in Tehran. The ambassador and his team entered Iran via the Astara border crossing, emphasizing Madrid's commitment to rebuilding diplomatic presence on the ground. According to Spanish officials, the reopening is aimed at supporting ongoing efforts toward peace and stability in line with directives from Spain's foreign ministry. Quote, "Together with my committed team, I have reopened today the Spanish embassy in Tehran in order to join in efforts for peace from every possible quarter." Madrid is also looking to expand bilateral cooperation with a focus on economic ties, investment opportunities, and long-term engagement. The ambassador has also indicated plans to assess Iran's tourism potential, highlighting a broader push to strengthen people-to-people and economic links. The reopening follows a recent ceasefire, which paved the way for diplomatic missions to resume operations. For now, Spain's return to Tehran sends a clear signal that even amid regional tensions, diplomacy is making a comeback.
At first glance, icy Greenland and war-torn Iran seem worlds apart. But now, a shocking geopolitical link is emerging. Experts say the U.S. war on Iran may have strengthened U.S. President Donald Trump's controversial push to acquire Greenland. Back in January, Trump's demand to acquire Greenland stunned NATO allies, especially Denmark, which controls the island. Now, the Iran conflict is bringing that demand back into focus. Why? Because when the U.S. went to war with Iran, key NATO allies refused to fully support Washington. They denied bases, airspace, and warships to Trump administration against Iran. Now that refusal has exposed a deep divide inside NATO, a growing gap between how America and Europe see and analyze global threats, especially under Trump. And Trump didn't hold back either. In a fiery message, he blasted NATO allies, saying NATO wasn't there when U.S. needed them, officially linking the Iran war directly to his Arctic ambitions.
It's not just NATO. You know who else didn't help us? South Korea didn't help us. You know who else didn't help us? Australia didn't help us. You know who else didn't help us? Japan. We've got 50,000 soldiers in Japan to protect them from North Korea. We have 45,000 soldiers in South Korea to protect us from Kim Jong-un, who I get along with very well, as you know. You notice how nice things are with North Korea? It's very nice. But we have 45,000 people, soldiers, in harm's way, and right next to Kim Jong-un with a lot of nuclear weapons. 45, which should have never happened if a certain president, I'm not going to mention this president because I happen to like him, believe it or not, but if a certain president did his job, Kim Jong-un would not have nuclear weapons right now. But they're all afraid to do their job properly. But just to conclude and just to finish, Japan didn't help us, Australia didn't help us, and South Korea didn't help us. And then you get to NATO, NATO didn't help us. There were some countries that did. Now, countries that have been good, now you could also say they're got to be a little bit more involved because they're in the territory, but Saudi Arabia has been excellent. Qatar has been excellent. UAE has been excellent. Bahrain, Kuwait. I mean, Kuwait did shoot down 3 of our planes. The only planes really that we lost with friendly fire, they call it. I call it unfriendly fire.
Security experts say this is about more than just one war. It's about a rapidly changing world where the U.S. wants stronger control over strategic regions, including the Arctic. Now, Greenland isn't just ice. It's a geopolitical gold mine, rich in rare earth minerals and critical for military positioning. And looming behind it all, China. Experts warn the real battle is long-term, a race for resources, technology, and global dominance. But not everyone is convinced. Critics say Trump's strategy isn't 4D chess, it's chaos driven by America First politics. And there's a major roadblock ahead: elections. With U.S. midterms approaching, analysts say Trump is unlikely to take aggressive action on Greenland. Why? Because even his core supporters are growing uneasy about foreign interventions. Many voters now fear another overseas move, another costly entanglement. This isn't the first time the U.S. and Europe have clashed. Washington warned for years about Russia, but Europe only reacted after the Ukraine war escalated. Now the same divide is playing out again. Experts say this isn't just about territory, it's about power, alliances, and the future of NATO itself.
U.S. President Donald Trump has ramped up pressure on NATO allies as tensions from the Iran conflict spilled into a wider transatlantic dispute. Reports indicated that Trump is considering pulling U.S. troops out of NATO countries that refuse to back his military campaign against Iran. The plan reportedly involves relocating American forces to nations seen as more supportive of Washington's actions, signaling a potential reshaping of U.S. military commitments in Europe. At the same time, Trump is also exploring a more drastic option, attempting to withdraw the United States from NATO altogether. His frustration stems from what he describes as a lack of support from key allies, particularly over securing the Strait of Hormuz, a critical oil transit route currently blocked by Iran. But despite the rhetoric, there is a major obstacle standing in his way. A 2023 U.S. law makes it nearly impossible for any president to unilaterally exit NATO. The legislation requires either a two-thirds majority in the Senate or a formal act of Congress to approve withdrawal. Ironically for Trump, that law was co-sponsored by Marco Rubio, now serving in Trump's own administration as the Secretary of State. Rubio had previously emphasized that no president should have the power to leave NATO alone, effectively binding future administrations to congressional approval. This meant that even if Trump wanted to walk away from the alliance, he could not do so without significant bipartisan support, something that appears highly unlikely. In Washington, resistance to leaving NATO is strong and bipartisan. Lawmakers from both parties describe NATO as the most successful military alliance in modern history and stress that U.S. security is deeply tied to its continued strength. Meanwhile, Trump's criticism of NATO is intensifying as his Iran strategy faces challenges. His push for allies to assist in reopening the Strait of Hormuz has so far met with limited enthusiasm, with several European countries declining to take part. This has added to his long-standing complaints that NATO members were not doing enough to support U.S. military efforts. The situation also created an awkward diplomatic moment as NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte held talks with Trump in Washington. While both sides described the discussions as frank, no clear resolution emerged. The broader backdrop remains a fragile ceasefire between the United States and Iran, with disagreements over its scope, particularly regarding Lebanon, continuing to fuel uncertainty. As Trump weighs troop movements and escalated rhetoric, one reality seems clear. Despite his threats and frustrations, exiting NATO was not a decision he could make alone. For now, the alliance stood firm, not just protected by strategy, but by law.
Cross-border fire between Israel and Hezbollah is intensifying again, with fresh rocket attacks from southern Lebanon, followed by Israeli airstrikes deeper into Lebanese territory. The Israeli military said earlier today that 4 rockets were launched toward the Carmiel area in northern Israel. According to initial assessments, 2 were intercepted by air defenses, while the remaining projectiles landed in open areas, with no immediate reports of casualties.
The attack is part of what Hezbollah described as a broader wave of coordinated strikes. The group said it targeted multiple Israeli positions and settlements along the northern front, including Misgav Am, Israeli troops in Kfar Giladi, and the Zeret barracks. Israel responded with air power. Strikes were reported in several locations across southern Lebanon, including Nabatea al-Fawqa, al-Abbasiyah, and the city of Bint Jabal. These areas have seen repeated targeting in recent days, as Israel continues operations against what it describes as Hezbollah infrastructure and launch sites. Rocket fire from Lebanon triggers interception and impact assessments in northern Israel, followed by Israeli retaliatory strikes aimed at degrading Hezbollah's capabilities. But the scale and frequency of recent incidents suggest the situation is moving beyond sporadic clashes toward a more sustained confrontation. While hostilities have ceased at other fronts, Israel and Hezbollah have continued the retaliatory strikes against each other. Iran has claimed Lebanon, the grounds from which Hezbollah operates, is also part of the ceasefire. However, Israel and U.S. have differed on the matter, leading to continued hostilities.
Massive escalation between Israel and Hezbollah as U.S.-Iran tensions continue to boil over. According to Press TV, the Lebanon-based Hezbollah militant group said it carried out 43 military operations against Israeli Defense Forces targets on April 12th. Hezbollah claimed its drones struck a key communications hub in the occupied Golan Heights. An IDF Merkava main battle tank was also targeted in a direct hit. Hezbollah reported launching multiple rocket barrages at Kiryat Shmona and Nahariya. The group also said Israeli military command sites and infrastructure were hit in guided missile strikes. The most significant Hezbollah operations included a precision drone strike on a communications station at the Al-Alika barracks in the occupied Syrian Golan Heights, resulting in a direct hit. A loitering drone strike targeted a Merkava tank near the hospital in Mais al-Jabal. Swarms of explosive drones struck Israeli troop gatherings in Al-Bayada, Yarun, and Kfar Yuval. Rocket barrages were launched at the Kiryat Shmona barracks, the Nahariya settlement, and the 146th Division headquarters in Gatton. Newly established Israeli positions in southern Lebanon, including the Balat site and the Al-Asi Heights near Mais al-Jabal, were also shelled. Hezbollah fighters also struck the IDF's Marin Air Surveillance and Operations Management Base, the Philon base south of Rosh Pina, and underground infrastructure in the Carmel and Katzrin settlements. The Iran-backed group said its operations continued throughout April 12 until late at night, launching multiple barrages at troop and vehicle gatherings in the border towns of Khiam, Bint Jabal, Taiba, and Aita al-Shab. Hezbollah said the attacks were in response to what it described as relentless Israeli aggression and repeated ceasefire violations. In a statement, the group said the operations were a duty to defend Lebanon and its people. This response will continue until the Israeli-American aggression on our country and our people stops, Hezbollah said. It added, the Islamic resistance is committed to defending its land and people, especially as the Israeli enemy has crossed all boundaries with its criminality. This is the minimum duty to stop it from advancing its dangerous goals against Lebanon, the state, its people, and the resistance. In the early hours of April 13th, the Lebanese armed group said it launched a rocket barrage at northern Israel in response to what it called repeated Israeli attacks on southern villages. Hezbollah said it targeted Kiryat Shmona at 1:20 a.m. local time and the settlement of Doviv at 2:45 a.m. Meanwhile, 2 Israeli soldiers from an elite paratrooper division were wounded by rocket fire in southern Lebanon, according to the Arutz Sheva media network. The soldiers suffered shrapnel injuries and were evacuated for medical treatment. This comes after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited parts of southern Lebanon under Israeli military control on April 12th, his first visit since the current round of fighting began. On April 11th, Netanyahu said Israel was working to establish an 8 to 10 kilometer buffer zone inside Lebanon to prevent Hezbollah from launching close-range rockets and anti-tank missiles across the border.
I am here with the Minister of Defense, the Chief of Staff, the head of the command, the division commander, and our reserve soldiers. There is a wonderful spirit here, a readiness to fight, and they are fighting well. The war continues, including within the security zone in Lebanon, where I was just a short while ago. What we are seeing is that we have thwarted the threat of an invasion from Lebanon through this security strip. There's the danger of Yam Pos. We are pushing back the threat of anti-tank missile fire and also dealing with the tunnels. But there is still work to be done. We have done a tremendous job, huge achievements. There is still more to do, and we are doing it. One of the things we are seeing here is that we have fundamentally changed the face of the Middle East. Our enemies, Iran and the axis of evil, came here to destroy us. And now they are simply fighting for their very survival. We are seeing this in every single arena. This is a tremendous achievement for the state of Israel and the Israel Defense Forces, our regular soldiers, and our wonderful reservists.
Amid the thunder of ongoing Israeli operations, Lebanon's Prime Minister Nawaf Salam stepped forward on April 12th with a message of resolve, declaring that his government is determined to bring the war with Israel to an end through negotiations, not continued bloodshed. A fragile diplomatic window is now set to open, as talks between Israel and Lebanon are expected to begin on April 14th in Washington, an extraordinary development triggered by Israel's surprise decision to authorize negotiations despite the absence of formal diplomatic ties. But on the streets of Beirut, the mood is anything but calm. For days, protesters ranging from Hezbollah supporters to fierce critics of the talks have taken to the streets, accusing the government of weakness and warning that Lebanon may not have the power to dictate the terms of peace.
In the Civil War, we fought against each other, and every single person paid a heavy price. However, today, what is demanded is that we all stand united, side by side, not with some of us opposing others, and that we must improve our internal conditions and prevent any form of discord or the mere threat of it or the terrifying prospect of civil war as if we are unaware of its devastating costs. I feel the anguish of the mother whose fighter son fell on the battlefield. I also feel the anguish of the mother who lost a child who never chose this war and only wished to live. I know that all of you are suffering more than you can possibly endure and have been for a very long time. We continue our efforts to stop the war, foremost among them the initiative presented by His Excellency the President to negotiate a ceasefire and enable legitimate state institutions to fully protect Lebanon and all Lebanese. And call upon all of you to hold fast to that which unites us for the protection of our homeland and the future of our children. Let us together confront the dangers surrounding us with reason, unity, and national responsibility.
The Israel-Hezbollah front is heating up with drones, rockets, and fierce street battles now unfolding in southern Lebanon. Hezbollah has released footage of a drone strike targeting Israeli positions in the southern town of Al-Taibeh. At the same time, around 20 rockets were launched from Lebanon into northern Israel, according to the Israel Defense Forces. Most were intercepted, others hit open areas. No injuries have been reported so far. But on the ground, the battle is intensifying. Lebanon's state media reports fierce clashes in Bint Jbeil, a known Hezbollah stronghold. Israeli troops have now encircled the town, pushing deeper into neighborhoods in a bid to dismantle Hezbollah's infrastructure. Heavy artillery fire has been reported on the outskirts and entry points as Israeli forces attempt to break through resistance. In a major escalation, the IDF says it raided a hospital in Bint Jbeil, claiming Hezbollah fighters were operating from inside. According to the IDF, troops killed around 20 armed operatives after coming under fire from within the hospital compound. Weapons were also reportedly seized. The Israeli military accuses Hezbollah of using medical facilities for military purposes, calling it a violation of international law. Hezbollah has not publicly responded to these claims. In a separate encounter, Israeli troops tracked down a Hezbollah gunman accused of killing an Israeli soldier days earlier.
After a gun battle inside a damaged building, the second militant was found hiding under rubble and killed in close-range combat.